Sorry about that. I know many view Ash's creation as a niche MMO, one that will attract a certain type of player but not the average MMO player. I also had that view, but lately I've been thinking that this MMO really does have that potential to become the top dog MMO. Now, there are a lot of things that would have to happen, the stars would have to align to some extent. I'm going to explain what likely would need to happen for this to occur. Most of these factors I'm going to discuss are well within reach for Intrepid Studios. These are not pie-in-the-sky ideas. But first, take your pants off. It's shorts, but you know, shorts or pants. Take your pants off, have yourself a beverage of your choice. Nart calls his Coca-Cola. I'm calling mine Elixir of Fortitude. So it's not a complete ripoff, just mostly a ripoff. Quality. I'm Bill Hicks, and I'll be your narrator for this Ashes of Creation video. Now let's toast to an Ashes of Creation release happening before the Earth is devoured by the sun. Bam! And I don't know if that picked up on the mic. I just toasted the mic. First ever thing that's been done with a mic in here, in this room. Alright. The first factor that could make Ashes the top MMO is the idea that there's never been a high quality, non-pay-to-win, and heavily marketed open-world PvP MMO. Name an MMO that has hit all of those points successfully. Archage maybe came the closest very early on, but it was not really a serious attempt in the end. Ashes, I do believe, will be the first high-quality, true open-world PvP MMO. Now, I know it is PvX and there are a lot of limitations on open-world PvP, but there are many systems that cause open world PvP to happen that bypass the corruption system, the main one being the caravan system. The corruption system means that PvE players have a place in this MMO as well, and that is incredibly important for any MMO to find success. If Ashes can pull off being the first highly polished open world MMO, and I do think they will, then they will start to pull all of those open world PvP folks that have been spread out amongst 10 different MMOs currently. The likes of Albion Online, Arcage, Black Desert Online, Bless Online, etc. Even some very old games that still have active player bases like Dark Age of Camelot, Ultima Online, and Warhammer Online. Then you have all the old school open world PvP fans of Dark Age, Lineage 2 Ultima, that have given up on MMOs and would give this one a shot if it pulled off a successful and polished open world experience. Many say open world PvP MMOs are not popular, but maybe the lack of popularity is because there has never been any serious attempts by a AAA project in the last 10 years. Maybe it's not due to a lack of a player base that wants that type of game. Maybe instead it is the lack of a game. It is really hard to get accurate player counts when it comes to most MMOs. Arcage at one point, despite all the problems, had 2 million registered users. Albion Online has around 3.7 million players based on the MMO population website. So it is impossible to estimate the population of open world PvP enthusiasts out there, but I do believe if Ashes can successfully pull that crowd into this game, that would be a great start on becoming the king of MMOs. Another factor is whether Ashes can appeal to the PvE progression crowd. How well the PvX systems combined with the corruption systems function will go a long ways towards this. I think the corruption system will not be so restrictive that it keeps away the open world PvP crowd, but will it be restrictive enough to bring in the PvE progression crowd? A surefire way to become the top MMOs to convince those that think the only way to have a PvE progression rating scene is one that is instant and 100% safe from the threat of players. That this MMO, while doing things much different, can also be a great place for them. Unfortunately, most in that scene in WoW and Final Fantasy have set beliefs on what an MMO is, and convincing them that very minimal fast travel and minimal instance PvE content is better will be a tall task. But now is potentially the time to capitalize on WoW slowly killing itself and FFXIV just being the same game with less corrupt leadership. There are undoubtedly many out there that are tired of the same old MMO blueprint and would try a completely different flavor of MMO if a highly polished MMO was presented to them. Another major factor in Ashes becoming mainstream would be to have some content for the more casual crowd. We cannot cater only to the hardcore crowd, as WildStar found out. The goal of Intrepid is to make leveling very much a part of the experience of the game, to make all zones and content relevant as much as possible at all levels. If they truly do achieve that, which will not be easy, but if they do, then I think casuals will feel at home in this MMO. The next factor I think might be necessary for Ashes to become the top MMO is I think it would help if it releases before Riot's MMO. Also, there's a new company called Dreamhaven that is stacked with incredible ex-Blizzard talent and funding that I think might have an MMO up its sleeve, although one has not yet been announced. The Dreamhaven MMO should be too far off to compete with Ashes, but the Riot MMO potentially could be a year or two behind Ashes, and depending on how development goes, that gap could narrow. It seems that Riot's MMO is still pretty far off, but they have a massive amount of resources and they're hiring an absolutely massive team. They're hiring 200 developers in addition to the ones already on staff. The project is very early, and I couldn't find the target developer count that they're striving for, but let's assume they go for a team of 250 plus. They can probably develop this MMO pretty fast, especially if they're not building a new engine, which seems possible though not yet confirmed. An MMO takes 4 to 8 years to develop usually, with 5 years being a pretty consistent average time. Riot has been working on this for roughly 1 year, though development seems to not have ramped up much yet. Let's say they could be on track for at least 4 years from now, so a mid-2026 release date. This is probably the earliest case scenario since they technically have not gotten heavy into development yet. Ashes first hired team members clear back in 2015 and finished their Kickstarter in 2017. June of 2017 is when they officially started getting production, and we know they had a 1-year delay to fix some server backend code when some major flaws were found in APOC. That being said, the game is 5 years into development, and the Alpha 1, well, to me it was a bit of a stretch to call it an alpha, at least by the traditional definition. Buggy is one thing, but the technical definition of an alpha is that it has all the content baked in. So we should have had max level, full crafting, and full node functionality to consider it an alpha. Alpha 2 is set to be level 35, which means even at that point it's not really an alpha since level 50 is the level cap upon release. So in many respects this game is pre-alpha, which probably puts release a minimum of 2 years out, but probably more realistically 3. This would mean any further delays or setbacks and Ashes could be butting up against release around the same time as Riot's MMO. And we know that can be a tough thing in a genre that is competing for a small number of players currently. Ask the MMOs that were released right before WoW how it went for them. I know this is a much different time, so it might not be as big of a factor as it was back then, but it is a consideration. While I personally am not the biggest fan of their games, Riot has a tremendous track record in terms of game success. League is by far the most popular MOBA, Valorant is one of the top shooters, and Teamfight Tactics is by far the most popular of the auto battler genre. Riot is a juggernaut in the PC gaming industry at this point. They are basically like Amazon Game Studios in that they have a massive war chest to develop games with, but they don't suck at making video games. Another factor that Ashes would probably need to capitalize on to become the top MMO is to bring in new blood to a genre that in many respects has already died. We all talk about how MMOs are dying, but they might already be there. One reason I say that is there is not any new blood coming into this genre. I did a video on this recently titled, "What is the average age of an MMO player in 2022?" and the answer was 37 years old. This could be a good thing for Ashes as they can potentially capitalize on a brand new generation of gamers that might be looking to try something new and not have any preconceived ideas of what an MMO needs to be. They don't think an MMO has to have instance rating. They don't think an MMO has to have fast travel because many of them have never played an MMO. Now I know there will be some cranky people from my generation and older who view the current generation negatively and think that they all want to play instant gratification games and don't want to have to work to achieve things in a game. To that I say, stop being a generationalist. It's not fair to lump an entire generation into one category. There are people of all types in each generation, and Ashes does not have to win over everyone in the Gen Z and Millennial generation to become highly successful. There is a huge untapped market of youth that has yet to have their life ruined by endless quests for shiny pixels. Also, just a quick side rant, but every single new generation has been looked at in a negative light. Mine certainly was. You can find newspaper articles from the early 20th century of people talking about how the latest generation was going to ruin the world. It's dumb, and if the newest generation was always so terrible, the world would not advance in any way. End rant. Final factor that I think Ashes is nailing at this point is marketing. Steven has done a marvelous job of getting huge streamers and content creators excited about this project, and that is massive in today's age. Now, to summarize, the factors I think Ashes could capitalize on, each of which helps propel it to the top of the MMO leaderboard, are as follows. Being the first truly polished AAA non-pay-to-win open-world PvP PvX MMO. Finding a way to balance hardcore and casual that allows Ashes to be a home for casuals just as much as most MMOs are. Maybe not as much as Guild Wars 2, but a balance is needed. Finding a home for PvE progression raiders. Releasing before Riot's MMO, finding a way to bring new blood into the MMO space to bring the average age of the MMO player down from a staggering 37 years old, and great marketing. I want to finish by saying not all of these things would have to happen to fall Ashes to the top, but I think a few of them probably have to happen for sure. Now put your pads back on now and do some IRL stuff until my next video. I'm Chris Rock, Thanks Guys Comedy. Now while the credits roll, Jimi Hendrix is going to play us out.